it took me a good 3 or 4. It took the third time I finally heard about it, and I started to study it rather than just dismiss it. Right. It's a difficult concept to get your head around. And then once I started to study it, it took me a while to really get my head around what it meant and why it was a sea change in finance and for hard money. But the reality is, gold and Bitcoin, the people who follow gold and Bitcoin, hard money enthusiasts in particular, they believe in everything. They're like super aligned with all their thoughts and reasoning and understanding what's going on with the debt and the expansion of the money supply and, and how this can be protective for them. But there's just that one, like right at the end, there's some that just haven't made that leap to understand it yet. So I gave my talk yesterday, and by and far, I think it was well received. I haven't talked to too many people about it yet, but there were a lot of people taking photos of my slides, and I could see people super engaged. And then there were some, audible sighs, and my whole thing is like, don't be hyperbolic about the prospect of Bitcoin. They can cut out a lot of the fat or all of the fat that we have in the government, reduce that deficit a little bit, open up some, bring down the regulation, perhaps use tariffs as a threat and get some advantage there, and then bring up our productivity, and all of that combined is positive for assets, right? So, and then on the backside of that is we've had an extremely antagonistic administration through Biden. And Harris was clearly just going to continue that on. I mean, we had a few sound bites that she wasn't, but it was clear that she was going to. So a huge development on that is that now we have Senator Lavish from Wyoming who's pushing the Bitcoin Act. This is a big deal.
Huge strategic reserve in the U.S. It would be massive.
Yeah. Exactly.
But selling gold to get there.
Maybe selling some of it, not all of it. But acquiring enough Bitcoin that would match what the gold reserves are now. That's the idea, I believe. And so, but buying 1 million Bitcoin, so just think through that for a minute. Now, you're going to buy 1 million Bitcoin, 200,000 are spending it. It's not that we are spending it almost $1 trillion discretionary. Just put that aside. The problem is that we have so much that spending that's signed into legislation through entitlements, and then we have defense contracts, and then the interest expense on our debt. You're over $1 trillion in deficit just on those 3 things alone. So what are you going to cut? Are you going to cut the defense spending? Are you going to cut entitlements? You can't cut interest. That's a default on your debt. So the issue is they want to cut a lot, but in order to cut down enough to get to get out of deficit, you're going to have to cut into the muscle and bone, and that's an issue. Okay, so let's put that over there. Now you've got your Fed meeting coming up. We've seen some conflicting economic data, right? So the Fed has lowered interest rates by 75 basis points in the last 2 meetings, 50 and then another 25. At the same time that they did that, the long bond has actually risen but it's kind of stuck there. It's really been
2.6, just like hovering, really stuck.
Yeah, really somewhere between 2.5 and 3.2, somewhere in there, right? Okay, so, but then you've got some readings that we had recently that unemployment was ticking up. Okay, so they lowered rates just in case, because we can't have a recession. Okay, so, and that's his second mandate is full employment. So what do you do? Well, the third lever he's got is quantitative tightening. So we've been tightening by $25 billion a month, down from 60 earlier this year. It's not really a lot. I mean, he could stop that. It's really more of a signal than an impact to the market, in my opinion. $25 billion on what we're so far in deficit, that's almost nothing. Right. Okay, so what should he do? Well, he's up against an issue here that some people are calling for him to just start raising rates again. Well, it's just going to make the deficit worse, right? Because your interest expense is going to go back up. Okay, so that's not an easy path. So if something happens in your home country, if you're in a hostile area, you can just pick up and leave, know your 12 words, and your Bitcoin, you're not taking it with you. It's everywhere. It's wherever you go. As long as you can access the internet, you can get to it.
Yeah. Fascinating. Hey, okay. Well, we're going to talk about MicroStrategy. Obviously, in the news, the company has the largest corporate Bitcoin holdings, and it's holding new record levels: 331,200 coins as of, I think, yesterday. In your latest newsletter, you kind of broke down the strategy. Could you do that for the audience?
Sure. So I've talked to Michael a few times about this, and he and his team are so smart. They figured out something, that we're calling a money glitch. What's happening here is that because MicroStrategy has an underlying business that is an operating company that is generating revenue, he's got revenue that he can use to pay interest on his borrowing, on his notes or third thing he can do is he can issue stock. What happens? Well, when he goes in, it's called the ATM. It's at the market. He just floats more stock. It's a secondary. So he floats more stock into the market. And when he does that, those shares, he gets money for those shares. So say he floats $100 million worth of stock. Okay. He'll turn around and take that $100 million and go buy $100 million worth of Bitcoin. But because his stock is trading at a premium to the underlying NAV of the Bitcoin, it's like right now it's about 3x premium. So because of that, he can turn around and go buy the Bitcoin and his stock goes up. It's mind blowing. So typically when you issue stock, it's a dilutive event. It dilutes the earnings. Of course, you understand this, but for your viewers, it dilutes your earnings. And so your stock would go down because it's dilutive. But he's issuing stock. He's taking that money, buying Bitcoin, and the stock goes up. So it's actually an accretive transaction. It's mind blowing.
What do you say to the people that go, okay, I want to buy a Satoshi, or do I buy a MicroStrategy stock? I mean, where's the exposure? What do you do coming? I did take the stock down a little bit. It was actually quite friendly. I remember when they have shorted other companies in the past, it wasn't as friendly. This one was like, we've talked to Michael. I think he was doing a really good job, but it's just gotten a little bit too hot. So they got a short position going. What's the strategy?
Well, I think it's dangerous. I've seen people short stocks that they thought were overvalued many times. This is a little bit different. And dangerous phrase, it's different this time, but this is a different situation than the ones I've seen, in that Michael's strategy right now, he's got a lot of momentum. He can just keep issuing these bonds and buying stock, and it's accretive. The danger is that premium does collapse. Okay, so they're making the bet that the premium collapses before Bitcoin goes up enough that they lose money. And that's a tough bet. I personally would not do that. I think that's you're stepping in front of a freight train, because Michael's got a lot of momentum here and he's got a lot of demand for those bonds. I mean, that thing was oversubscribed. I think it was supposed to be, that was so painful. This last administration was extremely hostile to this industry, and that's gone. So that's been eliminated. And so now we can see forward to that opening up. And for your viewers don't know what Choke Point 2.0 is, it was where the officials, government officials, whoever they were, whether it was Elizabeth Warren or Genza or whoever was in their little group there, they were putting pressure on traditional banks not to have on-ramps and off-ramps to crypto or Bitcoin related companies. And so I even felt it in my hedge fund, where we had subscriptions that were coming in from Wells Fargo or Bank of America. They would just get canceled, and they refused to send them because they were being sent to something that's called the Bitcoin Opportunity Fund. Even though we're a Delaware entity, you need assets, you need to hold assets. We do have an issue here especially in America, but in the Western developed world, that there's a separation of wealth occurring, and it's the people who have assets and the people who don't, and the people who have assets can keep up with this inflation. My sincere hope is that we have a period here where, we have a productivity wave where the middle class comes back and is able to start accumulating wealth again, at the same time that they don't have assets yet. But this is going to go on for a long time.
stay long, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't think that this is a 5-year event. This is going to happen for over a course of 20, 30 years. So people still have time.
Yeah.